I'd like to thank you for inviting me on the show. It's such an honour to be here, and I'd just like to say that when I'm not playing Xbox with my mate Thor, I really like to listen to my favourite podcast, Pop Culture Pasta. Hey Dave, I'm thinking about doing another revolution. Do you want to join up? I might need some help with organising the pamphlets though.
Pop Culture Pastor.
So sometimes, Cody, the things that send my mind into a loop, basically my life, let me just preface this whole thing. Basically, the way my brain works is you send me some piece of information, or I stumble upon some piece of information that sends my brain into this just like kind of frenzy of thinking about all these things. Well, is that true? That could be true. If it's true, then what else is true? What does this affect? How does this affect? Is this a legacy thing? Is it going to go on? What people are going to think about this in 30 years? My brain just never stops.
You need to take a deep breath.
I know, but I've learned to live with my brain, and I saw a tweet. You sent me a tweet.
I send a lot of tweets.
And normally, like, again, let me preface this by saying we don't really talk about politics, but we're not talking about politics in like the main sense here. This is just going to be abstract as an event, right?
Oh.
As someone who lives in a world where political things happen, this tweet says, "It's absolutely wild that the only lasting impact of the Trump assassination was Tenacious D breaking up." And I started thinking about that. And I'm like, okay, so it was a failed assassination attempt. He's still alive. He's fine. It doesn't appear that anybody's going to get in trouble for that. The person who perpetrated it is gone. The Secret Service, there was a commission. I'm putting out my very terrible current event brain too, because I don't really pay attention to stuff, but I know that there was a big commission meeting thing on Capitol Hill where there was a lot of yelling and grandstanding, as usually happens on Capitol Hill. But it doesn't appear like anybody's going to get in trouble. Maybe she'll lose her job, the head lady. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but that seems pretty minimal compared, to, for what happened. And so and Trump, is just Trump. So is this tweet right? Like, I started really thinking about that, and I thought, oh my gosh, this has been a conspiracy to break Tenacious D up from the beginning.
I don't know if it was a conspiracy to break Tenacious D up.
Is Jack Black behind all of this?
He's behind the breakup for sure.
Yeah.
Which I'm still I'm team, is it Kyle?
Kyle Gass.
Yeah, I'm team Kyle, I think.
Well, it's all super weird because now, especially in retrospect, you felt this way from the beginning. I was just like, I don't know, man, tensions are high. I get it. But now in retrospect, it looks like a severe overreaction, doesn't it? On Jack Black's part.
I definitely get we need to issue a public apology and maybe take a month off.
Absolutely. I agree completely with that. It seems like a written apology that you didn't write. We all know it. Like, it's wild. It's kind of wild to think, oh yeah, that was the most impactful thing that happened from all of that. It was in the realm of pop culture.
It was, which is bananas.
It is kind of bananas. Are we living in an M. Night Shyamalan world?
You betcha.
I think we are. See, this is the sort of frenzy this kind of thing sends my brain into. Someone presents a thought like that, and then I'm like, yeah, this is all weird. Why is it all happening like this? It seems like if I had to guess the outcome of some event that happened every day, and you gave me 20 different options, none of them would be right. I used to think I was pretty good at knowing what the world was going to do.
So I might actually blame Community, the hit TV series, for this.
Oh, this ought to be good. Is it Chevy Chase's fault?
Well, it could be, because there was an episode where they did parallel realities, and we might be in the darkest timeline.
Oh, the one we might be in the darkest timeline where Abed has a goatee.
Who's missing the arm? Is it Joel McHale?
By the way, that is perhaps the greatest Community episode of all time.
Which Very ahead of its time, by the way.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was all about that was the multiverse.
And if I'm not mistaken, the Russo brothers might have been in directing that era of Community. So the Russos.
I tend to think that the Russos are spectacular. I think they're brilliant. And I think Marvel getting them back is huge because if you go back and listen to our review of Deadpool and Wolverine, while it was wildly entertaining, we looked at it and said, you know what? They're still not back to that storytelling edge they had.
Or like portraying the multiverse in any sort of rhyme or reason.
Well, I think clearly we can look at them and say the multiverse was maybe too big of a piece to break off for them. It was too big of a bite. Because they clearly weren't prepared to really tell us this multiverse story. They weren't prepared. And maybe that's the problem is when you're telling, like the Thanos story is largely already been told.
Yeah.
Like you had a framework to go off of. It's not quite as big, even though the effect of it's huge on the universe you're telling the story in. But multiverse is just vast. With all these options and different ways you can go. And it seems like maybe it was just too much for Marvel, the way they tell stories, because Marvel's very seat of the pants, right? After the Infinity stuff, they were like, we're going to tell these stories and we're going to just change up the story when we feel like it's not working and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And I just don't think it works with maybe the vastness of the story they were trying to tell now.
I think you gotta have key significant moments in each of the movies that you portray and already have those plotted out. You just need to get there in a not so convoluted way that you don't lose everyone as you get there. And I don't think they've had any real key moments in any of the properties that were supposed to set up the multiverse or Kang or anything else now.
So to sum up, our reality is ridiculous. I don't know who's writing this, but they probably need the Russos.
Yeah, and Jack Black was in an episode of Community as well.
He was.
So it might be him that kickstarted this darkest timeline.
It might be time to go back and rewatch Community. I've already watched it 2 times through, but we might need a third. Hello, this is Pop Culture Pastor, the podcast. My name's Dave. Cody's here.
With all the Jack Black conspiracy.
I'm telling you, man, I think this is all Jack Black. I have another story before we, get to our main thing. I was on the internet again yesterday.
As one does.
And I came across a video, and it was sort of random, but it was the dude from Blake Lively's new movie called It Ends With Us. Have you seen this? His name is Brandon Sklenar. I've never heard of him. But it's an interview, and it's Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively's husband, interviewing her co-star. And this is like a romantic, at least some sort of romantic in this movie between Blake Lively and Brandon Sklenar. And it's the whole tenor of the interview is of course Ryan Reynolds pretending to be super, super very insecure about this man acting like he's in love with Ryan's wife, who's also acting because they're actors.
Yes.
But the interview's hilarious. It features Ryan Reynolds' mom eventually in the video. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, this is the best thing I've seen. This is better than some movies I've seen. Just this little interview, this whole setup. It turns out like it's like almost like a Saturday Night Live skit with bad words. Because there are bad words in it, especially from Ryan Reynolds' mom.
Ryan Reynolds' mom.
But what I want to ask is this. Is Ryan Reynolds the greatest advertiser in the world right now? This is just his wife's movie. Deadpool Wolverine had all these little videos and stuff they were doing that some of them are just as entertaining as the movie. They're funny. They're hilarious. They're smart. They're clever. And then I saw this interview, and it's hilarious. I don't even know this dude, this actor. And yet he comes off like he's great in it. He's the straight man, basically. He has to sit there and just be in this chaotic Ryan Reynolds world, but he comes off as hilarious too. And I'm thinking, I had no interest in seeing this movie. Didn't know it existed. And now I'm like, yeah, I'd see it.
I think that for me, Ryan Reynolds might be perfect in quick burst. And honestly, he was great in Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place. It might have been the perfect avenue for him. Mm-hmm. And he can do movies, and he can do serious movies. But there's been, I mean, you and Jackson talked about several pods ago that Ryan Reynolds might not be fully him to like carry a movie all by himself with like a few outliers, because like his movies aren't largely successful except for you look at Deadpool, Deadpool 2, Deadpool Wolverine. But the things he gets involved with seemingly turn to gold, like outside of the realm of cinema. So he had the tequila company, he had the football club.
Yeah, he's genius. Everything he touches turns to gold.
And the little snippets that him and Rob McElhenney shoot together, they're great. And so those two have like created a culture around like their football club that has transcended and has even made it stateside. Like, oh, these two are just good friends, and oh, this football club's just charming, even though we call it soccer. I think that part of us really likes Ryan Reynolds, but at the end of the day, I don't think we can stay with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. Let me try and fill out what I think you're saying. He is like a manic. He has this manicness that around him creates this atmosphere of manic creativity and wit. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of manic, and it rubs off on the people around him. And it's almost like, yeah, guys think he's cool and want to be him. Girls think he's cool and adore him. And of course, and then you throw on top of it, he's very funny. He's just a funny guy, and he's witty, and he comes up with these ideas of like, and then he's just like, he doesn't even think about it or care. It seems like he just shoots it. He's like, let's just do it. Let's just create it. And then we'll decide if we thought it was appropriate, something like that. It's so much so that everything around him starts to become cool. Like Rob McElhenney. Like if you don't watch It's Always Sunny, then do you care about Rob McElhenney?
Oh, you should.
But probably not. One of the players from his team, Wrexham, the soccer team he bought, was actually in Deadpool as the Welsh Deadpool variant. That they called Welsh Pool.
Yes.
The team actually changed his picture in the program online to Welsh Pool with the soccer player's name. So stuff like that. I'm like, they don't even think about it. It's just always, oh, can we do something funny? Let's do that. And so, I don't know. I think it's very interesting that he just creates this atmosphere of this, and it's cool. He's funny and cool and kind of manic. Here's the problem with what I think you're saying. It's very one note. Once you understand Ryan Reynolds, you get him.
I got him clear back when we were Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place.
And so I've watched other movies. I'm a fan of Spirited, the Christmas movie he did with Will Ferrell. I'm a fan of If. I thought that was a good movie, but he's sort of playing versions of himself. I don't know that he has much range, I guess is what I'm saying. He just is him.
The one where he's buried alive, that one wasn't bad.
I did not see that one. But here's the problem. Range isn't just about what you can do. It's about what people want from you. Do people want serious Ryan Reynolds?
Not often.
This is why people get typecast, not because they're not talented and have range. It's because it turns out we only like one of the little thing you do.
Not all of us can be Denzel.
this started off with, I'm being very complimentary, Ryan. It sounds like I'm being negative now. Not at all. I think if you want a funny movie, give it to Ryan.
Indeed.
And then don't put handcuffs on him. Just let him go. You just like wind him up on his back. He's probably got a little crank. You just turn that crank and just let him go.
Yes.
Because do you get the feeling that for Deadpool and Wolverine, he just was in charge of all the promo?
I definitely feel he had a strong say. I feel like it could have gone even further, but Disney definitely had its hand in some of the containment of a Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, because with some kinds of entertainment, when he's affiliated with some people, there will need to be overseers. Because again, I think he just goes. And I don't think he thinks about, oh, is this going to offend anybody or whatever? Now, usually Ryan Reynolds isn't super offensive, but I could see how it could get out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I saw this fake interview with Ryan Reynolds and the co-star, his wife's co-star from this movie, It Ends With Us. I had never heard of the movie, and I thought, she said in an interview, it's like, he actually, apparently, it was also making news that he rewrote the last scene of this movie.
Yes.
And she said he works on all my movies, and I just thought, man, this dude is talented, and just what a blessing. Are you going to hire, if you need an actress, why not just hire her and know you're going to get Ryan Reynolds out of the deal?
She evidently helps him on all his movies as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
Power couple.
They are a power couple. And I'm just really impressed. I'm just impressed by them. And I don't say that much about like Hollywood type people. But man, like even if Ryan Reynolds isn't your cup of tea, you can't deny the creativity that just coming out of him.
Yeah.
It's wild. Anyways, all right. We're here to talk about another very creative dude. We're going to take a break and we're going to come back and talk about M. Night Shyamalan.
My night.
We'll be back. Greetings, Dave's Blurb Voice here. In a world where we do movie reviews on a podcast, you need to be aware that we are going to spoil the nerd out of this movie. We know that spoilers aren't everyone's cup of tea, so if that's you, go ahead and hit pause, see the movie, and then come back and listen to this thrilling podcast later. The Pop Culture Podcast movie review starts now. Okay, we are back, and we both saw the movie Trap.
We did.
And we wanted to talk about it, but I don't know, we could get in depth on this movie, but we just both, I think, kind of wanted to talk about M. Night Shyamalan in general, who is...
My night.
That never gets old.
It doesn't.
His full name, Manoj Niliyatu Shyamalan. I think he did a good job going with M. Night, because I can pronounce that much easier. But M. Night Shyamalan, plus it just sounds cool. This is what Wikipedia says about him. He's an American filmmaker. His films often employ supernatural plots and twist endings. The cumulative gross of his films exceeds $3.3 billion globally.
Hey.
He's received various accolades, including nominations for 2 Academy Awards, 2 BAFTA Awards, and a Golden Globe. He was born in Maha, India, raised in Penn Valley, Pennsylvania. His early films include Praying with Anger and Wide Awake, which you don't really need to see.
I have not seen.
Before his breakthrough film, The Sixth Sense, which earned him Academy Award nominations for Best Director and Best Original Screenplay. I think most of us who are fans of M. Night, it was The Sixth Sense probably that at least got you aware of his existence. Is that kind of when you first started noticing?
Yes. So I didn't get to watch in theaters, but my parents did rent it after much whining and complaining because Okay, so a little backstory. My mom, if she thinks a movie is weird, she's like, I don't want to watch this. This seems weird.
Well, then she's not going to be a fan of old M. Night.
Yes. And so we watched this one, and she's like, this was weird. Why did you guys choose this one?
Your mom's just wholesome.
Yes. And that would also influence how and when I would get to watch some of his next projects that come up.
So, just right off the bat, are you a super fan? Just mild? Like, where are you at with M. Night Shyamalan?
It's interesting because Sixth Sense comes out, and like, I really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. And then, like, for me, he kind of disappears as a director because I know Signs. I watched Signs, but I don't like equate it to M. Night at that point. And then The Village, it was at that point that I'm like, oh, this M. Night cat, he's a big deal. Although I think The Village, like the way it was marketed, was so weird.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. I think as we get, we can go movie by movie if we need to, but I'm going to talk about The Village. I know when I talk about some of his movies that are kind of my favorites. But yeah, it's this interesting kind of the way you're introduced to him, the way you become aware of his movies. Because for me, I didn't see The Sixth Sense when it came out. And then I heard, obviously it was impossible to not hear about the craze of the twist ending. It gets made fun of, it gets parodied, whatever. It's just everywhere. And so by the time I see The Sixth Sense, I'm already super well aware of what the twist is, which I think took some of the enjoyment out of the movie for me. So for me, when I fall in love with M. Night Shyamalan, is actually Unbreakable.
I find that in the $5 bin at Walmart.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, that's good.
Yeah. Unbreakable is odd if you look at it in the string of his early movies. It's odd because it doesn't have the same sort of structure. There is still a twist at the end based on someone's identity in the movie. Mm-hmm. But it's very much... It's almost like a love letter to comic books, which of course I would love Unbreakable because it basically M. Night Shyamalan said, I'm going to do a comic book movie, but what if it happened in my odd reality?
And it did.
Yeah, and it did. And I love Unbreakable. I love Bruce Willis in that movie. I love the whole concept of, hey, if there were superheroes in our reality, maybe they wouldn't know it. Maybe it wouldn't be so obvious to them. And maybe if there were supervillains, maybe they wouldn't be. It's crazy that the character who's the villain in the movie, who ends up being Mr. Glass, played by Samuel L. Jackson, he's very much aware he's the villain. M. Night may have been ahead of the game because he's set up very much like we portray villains now, especially in like the MCU, where he's a villain, but you understand why. You feel sorry for him.
It's weird to me though that like M. Night gets like all these big names, especially early on, and like Unbreakable wasn't a huge box office success.
No.
Like I literally didn't hear of it until it was in the $5 bin at Walmart in the DVDs, and that they put M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable, starring Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson. And I'm like, that's worth $5. I'll go down the rabbit hole.
So his career is one of like where he's just huge right from almost the beginning for him. He's kind of on this wave of the hype from Sixth Sense that results in this handful of movies that are mostly good. And then he has a string of like really poorly received movies. And then he's almost like shunned. Right? He goes through this period where he's like shunned. Nobody cares. Nobody wants any of his movies. But then in the last probably 10 years, he's had kind of a resurgence.
At one point, he basically was Alfred Hitchcock of this generation.
That's actually a very good comparison.
And then it's like Lady in the Water happens, and he takes on water and doesn't resurface, especially after he makes Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it comes out around the same time as Avatar. And I'm not going to lie, I actually preferred The Last Airbender to Avatar, but that is James Cameron slander. I'll name it. But
I think you're about the only person that would say that.
yeah.
Because when I
I'm
hear
an
people,
honesty broker, Dave.
when I hear people talk about Shyamalan's Last Airbender, there's usually like spit and vitriol.
So, like, compared to the source material, it's not good. But I don't know if you could tell it in a movie. So that might have been, format was wrong. But then finally he came back and everyone's like, where you been, buddy?
I think it's Split that really cements like, oh, he's back. He is back. He captured our imaginations again with Split. And now we're at the point where the movie we're going to talk about at the end of this pod, like we're going to do a little mini review of Trap because we both saw it. On the advertisement, it's M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. Like he's back. He's back to where, oh, we can advertise that this is one of his movies and it'll be a good thing.
So there was a movie that he did, and I didn't know he did it, and Will Smith's in it.
Whoa, what movie is this?
So if IMDb is not lying, he directed After Earth.
Yeah, yes, he did.
And like
Will and Jaden, right?
Yeah, I completely blocked out that M. Night had any activity in this whatsoever. It was like, oh, Will Smith is doing a project with his son.
Well, so interesting story. After Earth is kind of the last in that string of really poorly received movies that he does, which starts with Lady in the Water. Did you see Lady in the Water?
I did. I saw it in theaters.
I did too. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I know how I feel about when I saw it. I was like, I walked out of the theater, but what was that? It was advertised as an M. Night Shyamalan movie. But I think that movie it's not what M. Night intended, at least to be advertised in that way. He's just telling a bedtime story.
Yes.
In his little weird world.
Paul Giamatti's there, and M. Night gave himself too big of a role. Because like Hitchcock, he is in every one of his movies.
Yes. Honestly, I think by the end of this, what I'm going to end up saying is I think he's gotten an unfair rap. Even when he's doing these movies that they're not well done, to be honest. I think there is an aspect of him where he's just going to do what he does, and he's not really worried. Of course, I'm sure he's like everyone else, and he wants to do his creations to be good. He wants people to like them. But I think he's just going to do what he does, and you're either into that or you're not.
It's like if you like Tim Burton or you don't like Tim Burton. Because Tim Burton's movies are very distinct in style, choices that he makes, and seem very eccentric goth.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on the pod, and that's a good thing to say, because I don't know if I've ever said that when I say that Tim Burton's not my thing. I can also say that what he does as a filmmaker is very exact. It's very good. It's quality. I can see that.
It's just science.
It's just not my bag. But let's get into a little bit of the good stuff here. What are your favorite M. Night movies and why?
Okay, so I will go with, to start off with Split, the comeback movie, if you will. James McAvoy, his acting in it is phenomenal. He has to carry so much weight of the movie, but he is playing this character with dissociative identity disorder. And that's the thing with M. Night, is he dives into these things that are very obscure. The likelihood of you knowing someone personally with dissociative identity disorder is very, 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 very slim. We have within our area, like out of the 50 therapists that I've talked to, one I know of for sure, and there's probably another one that has probably seen it, but 2 out of 50, that have seen someone with dissociative identity disorder.
Wow.
Because, like, for a while, there was an influx of people saying, I have this because of TikTok. Most of the time, you don't have it. And you wouldn't know if you have it.
So what's the difference between this dissociative identity disorder and, like, being just bipolar?
There's a distinct multiple personalities within this one individual, and it snaps. Where bipolar, you're the same individual, you just have distinct moods.
Okay.
Like you get really high and manic, all the energy, and you might crash and be super depressive, and just trying to find that happy medium is a struggle. Where dissociative identity, there's a complete break in character. You might be born Dave Rimbolt, who's right-handed, but your break in character might be Christoph, who's left-handed and can only see out of one eye.
Yeah.
And has a lot of personality quirks that you don't have. And so those things are unique. Now, if you're a mental health advocate, you might have mixed feelings just because, like, oh, James McAvoy's a killer in this movie. And, like, the likelihood of someone having this diagnosis, being a killer, seems a little far-fetched, but it's plausible.
Yeah. In an M. Night movie? Far-fetched, you say?
And the cast in it's really good.
Oh, man, it's great. This is our, like, kind of our first real glimpse of Anya Taylor-Joy, who's huge now. And so Split, first of all, I loved this movie. I really enjoyed Split. James McAvoy's incredible in this movie. And this was the movie where I realized a lot of things with M. Night. So before this, M. Night Shyamalan's a curiosity to me. The curiosity with the guy with the twist endings. Mm-hmm. This movie helps me figure him out in a lot of ways. Number one, he is capable of building a movie around one actor or actress and just getting this performance out of them that's odd but amazing.
It was.
Like, James McAvoy in this movie is just absolutely stunning. It's stunning, his performance in this movie. I'm just watching this movie, I can remember feeling in the theater like, I just can't believe this is this dude. Because it's not like I thought he was a bad actor, but you don't think, when you think like Academy Award winning level actors, you don't honestly just come land on James McAvoy.
Not before this movie.
Exactly. This movie, this performance from him is amazing, and that has a lot to do with what M. Night is asking him to do, what he's directing him to do, and what he directs all his actors to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing I realized about M. Night Shyamalan in this movie is the oddness of his world and how it works on a small level. So Split, even though he's a guy this movie takes place in a city, it takes place in and around like a mental institution at times. It has other characters. At its heart, it's very small. There's not very many characters in the movie who are speaking. Mm-hmm. It's a very intimate story at heart. It's small. And M. Night's odd, awkward world, it's almost like M. Night is directing movies that are adjacent. It looks like our reality. It sounds like our reality sometimes, but it's like an alternate reality where everybody's just a little more odd and awkward.
Most of his movies take place around Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or in the nearby Pennsylvania area. It has made me believe that maybe Philadelphians are really like this and that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, that those characters aren't that far-fetched.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a wonderful kind of world that M. Night puts you in. But I'll say that I noticed that when his movies work, it's on a smaller scale. Once he starts getting in a larger setting, Unbreakable maybe being the exception, although again with Unbreakable, it's not like the setting's big where it takes place.
The characters are finite.
But again, the movie is very intimate. when it comes to the characters that are speaking and interacting, it's very small.
And the twist in this one was at the very end in the post credits, and you're like, hey!
Yes. Okay. So
buddy.
that leads me to the third thing that Split made me realize about M. Night Shyamalan. These are not twists. I think it's a misnomer to call them twists, even though I call them twists all the time because that's just how he's known. Actually, I think this movie made me realize that, oh, no, it's not really a twist. Imagine his movies as like a puzzle. And the twist, what we call the twist, is actually the last piece of the puzzle that has some very pertinent piece of information to understanding the whole picture.
Yes.
So in this movie, you watch the entire movie and it's good. You're gripped. It's thrilling, it's gripping, it's all of that, but it's very intimate, it's very small. And then when he puts that last puzzle piece in place, you realize that you were in a story the whole time you didn't realize you were in.
And I was like, hey, I've seen Unbreakable.
Yes, exactly. So you get that ending, and then as soon as that ending happens, you realize you've been watching a sequel or a spinoff this whole time that's happening in the same world as Unbreakable. And then your mind just starts racing. It's almost euphoric, the way this happens, because then you can piece together, and you almost have to go back and rewatch it. Which this is why M. Night movies with these kind of endings are great rewatches, because you watch it in a different way with a new understanding, and you can start picking up things you didn't pick up the first time. And it's just really fun. And Split was what made me realize that with him, and that's going to be a common theme when I go over the movies I like about the quote-unquote twist ending. And Split's amazing. What other movies of his do you like?
So I will say one that I know you'll say, but we're going to have completely probably different reasons. The Village.
Yeah.
So I told you that it was advertised really weird. So it was advertised as a super like horror movie.
Yeah.
And like the scariest movie of the year. And so when I rented this movie, because I didn't get to watch it in theaters, I rented this movie and I'm watching it and I'm like, this isn't scary in the traditional sense of scary.
Yeah.
The colors are stunning. The characters are otherworldly at times. You have this cast that not only includes Sigourney Weaver and William Hurt, but Joaquin Phoenix, Bryce Dallas Howard, this is how she gets her like big break. Adrian Brody, and you are watching this and trying, because by this point you know that there's going to be a quote unquote twist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so what's going on here? And like, besides that, there's a blind girl trying to rescue her village. And then you get to the very end of the movie and you're like, what? This is a thing? Oh, these people are reclusive, that they broke off from society and are living without any technology or anything, because this is in modern times.
Yeah.
And they have raised up at least a generation of people that are unaware that we are living in a world that has all these other people and big machines and electricity and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I think this movie got an unfair shake at the time, because I think when on repeat viewings, when you go back and watch this and you give it a real chance, you're going to find that this movie's actually really good. It's very smart. The twist doesn't happen at the very end. It's kind of... It happens a little bit before. There's a little bit of movie after the twist. But I think this movie, above all the other things that you just said, which the cast is great. He seems like he's in this movie. He seems like he's perfecting the kind of actors that really work well in his kind of style. So Joaquin Phoenix, Adrian Brody, those are actors in particular that just flourish.
Yes.
With the M. Night Shyamalan weirdness. But I want to talk about the twist here. And I'm going to say the twist, quote unquote, because again, it's the last puzzle piece that makes you understand the story in a real way. I never got it until the repeat viewings, and until I became a Christian. because I think, what they end up being is very cultish.
Yes.
And that has an air of the religious aspect, that just kind of goes along with that. And to me, what this says is this is an incredible twist, and it's very smart and very abstract thought. But a lot of faith traditions, especially the more conservative they tend to fortress. They want a fortress against the world, protect their children. You'll hear a lot of different reasons for it. But I think this movie's really interesting because the idea of all of this is they try to fortress themselves away from the world because they think the monsters are out there.
Yes.
And by the time they realize the call's coming from inside the house, it's too late. Everything's going to come crashing down. I love the idea of this, of we sometimes use religion as this thing to make ourselves feel like we're better than other people. And by the time we figure out that we're not, it's self-destructive.
It is. And I honestly feel this movie was ahead of its time just because of some of the groups that have kind of prospered more recently. Mm-hmm. I know people would be like, there's no way that people would be unaware of other people or would not. This is so unbelievable. But in this world of misinformation, I honestly could see groups breaking off. And if you can raise a generation or two away from people, you have your own reality. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem as far-fetched.
Yeah. So do you have any other movies you want to point out as your favorite M. Night movies?
So I will go with just one more, and that is Knock at the Cabin.
Okay, so I never saw this one.
Oh, this one was so good.
It's on my list of movies now that it's streaming. It's on my list of movies to watch, but I felt like I heard not great things about it.
This is where I decided Dave Bautista actually might be a good actor and not just a big guy that can do action movies or comic book movies. So it's based off of a book, and the book's slightly different the way it ends, but the existential dread and is this really happening or not? Like, you're constantly questioning, are the strangers that come to the door telling the truth, or are they lying? Ron Weasley makes an appearance, and I'm like, hey, Rupert, I haven't seen you in forever. And so
Cody and Rupert Grint,
yes,
amazing friends for years.
BFFs, really. And you watch this movie, and like, you're just constantly on the edge of your seat of, are they going to do this or not? Is this real or not?
Now, not having seen this, is there a twist?
I wouldn't say there's a twist. Like, at the end, you get some information that kind of clarifies whether the strangers were telling the truth or not. But even then, you're still kind of left in questioning mode. It was a good movie. My wife, she really enjoyed it, but she really enjoyed the book as well. And so she had some anxiety going into it. Like, are they going to tell the story well? Are they going to change some things or not? And they definitely changed some things, but I think it works better for cinema.
Yeah. My favorites, we've kind of already, I've been able to piggyback off of you. I already told you that Unbreakable is kind of one of my heart favorites, just because of the subject matter and superheroes and all of that. We talked about The Village, which I don't think I really liked that all that much at first, but upon repeat viewings and a better understanding of just M. Night Shyamalan, I've actually learned to really appreciate The Village quite a bit. I actually like The Happening.
Oh, I enjoyed The Happening
in a different way. It's one of the most bonkers bad movies you'll ever see, in my opinion. Like, it's just super entertaining, and I only call it bad. It's really hard to call M. Night Shyamalan movies good or bad. They're just M. Night Shyamalan movies.
My problem with M. Night movies, and I've come to identify this the older I get, is that you're always looking for the twist. Mm-hmm. And so you're like playing a guessing game, which then takes you out of the movie itself, or fully enjoying the movie itself.
Yes.
Trying to guess like what the happening is being caused by. And early on, it was one of the guesses that my friend and I who watched this movie in theaters like came up with, but I had come up with like 15 other guesses after of what it could be, and then like at the end you're like, it was this?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of disappointing in that route, but I think if any other director would have done this movie, I wouldn't have been looking for a twist. I just would have been like, what's causing this?
Yeah.
And would have been sucked into the movie, and then I might have appreciated that it's really the trees that are causing all this chaos.
It's that dang Lorax.
Yep.
We knew it all along. Yeah. So in order to say what I think is wrong with M. Night, where M. Night Shyamalan goes wrong, I have to talk about something, the reason he's good first. So my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie is Signs.
My wife's favorite.
We've talked about Signs. Did we do a Be Kind Rewind?
No, we need to, because my wife wants to come on and talk about Signs.
Okay, so we haven't done a Be Kind Rewind on Signs, but we have talked about it before. And I'll just talk about this one little aspect. At its heart, Signs is brilliant in that he takes a bombastic world invasion of aliens and he takes it down to this very small, intimate, but from the perspective of a rural Pennsylvania family. And it's my favorite because of that, because of the feel of the movie. But it also makes me realize why when M. Night goes wrong or it's not as well received, I know the problem. So we already talked about M. Night has his own little world. People look like people from our reality. They talk like it. But at the end of the day, they're just a little off. They're a little odd. Like M. Night was born to do Twilight Zone episodes.
He was. I always worded that the actors kind of feel stiff.
Sometimes, but there is some depth to it.
Yes. It's weird.
Yeah, he's just weird.
I can't say, like, describe it any better than they're kind of stiff, but they're not really, but it's weird.
Yeah, I think if you're not looking too deep, and people used to have this critique, especially Mark Wahlberg in The Happening. I used to give this critique, but I think when you look deeper, it's not that. It's not that he just provokes stiff acting. He's getting them to do awkward, odd acting. They're just awkward, odd versions of our reality. And so that works really well on a small scale. A rural family in Pennsylvania that lives out in the country by themselves, you in your mind think, yeah, they could be total weirdos themselves. They seem normal, but they're odd because the less people you're talking about, there are odd people in the world. We know this. Mm-hmm. So it really works when he's intimate. I'll tell you when it gets a little stretched. So in The Happening, the whole thing becomes this, they're trying to escape. They think they can outrun whatever's happening, and so they keep meeting more people and more people and more people. And that's when it starts to stretch a little bit, because the bigger the setting, the wider the setting, the more people that are in this, in his camera lens view that are a part of this story, the oddness turns into like, okay, now I don't recognize these humans. They're not making choices the way humans would make choices. It's just, it's going from a little odd and a little awkward to completely untenable. And I think the movie we're going to talk about today, Trap, has some of those issues.
I honestly don't think he's a horror director in the truest sense of the word.
No.
But
he's like Hitchcock. That was a very good comparison.
Suspense, he nails it. He can get you on the edge of your seat. And he's thought-provoking. And whether you like the ending after you get the missing puzzle piece or not, that's up to you. But he's an interesting cat.
Yeah. So for me, I hadn't seen any movie since Glass. I hadn't seen Old. I haven't seen Knock at the Cabin. And then I saw Trap. And I think Glass was a movie for me where, oh, he's coming back. He's coming back. I'm happy with this. I'm excited about M. Night being back. I'm excited he's making a sequel to Split and sort of Unbreakable, bringing that all together. And I was excited about
the trilogy.
Yeah. And then the end of that movie so soured me because of a choice he makes that seems like it was almost like, hey, I'm going to bring a guy in to give me notes for how I'm going to end this movie, and that guy is George R.R. Martin. Like, you killed off this like beloved character who's played by a beloved actor. He drowns in a puddle.
Yep.
Spoilers, he drowns in a puddle, and that's pretty much the end of the movie, and you're like, really? That's what you brought this all together for me to watch that? I felt very much like I felt when I read The Red Wedding in George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones books. I like threw the book across the room and didn't pick it up for 2 weeks.
If Dave had the DVD or Blu-ray of Glass.
So that was kind of the last movie I saw because it upset me, actually, if I'm being honest. But now I saw Trap, and I kind of fell in love with M. Night's movies again by watching Trap. And Trap's not a perfect movie.
I still need to watch Old and the Will Smith movie. I haven't watched After Earth because I didn't think it looked good. Now, if you had told me M. Night directed it, I might have watched it.
So let's move to Trap here.
Yes.
We're going to do a mini review of Trap. And it's got about 54% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I might be a little bit above that, but not a whole lot.
I will be more above it.
Yeah, it's obviously directed by M. Night. The budget was $30 million. I don't know what it's made, but I'm guessing it's going to make money.
I'm pretty sure it made back its money.
Okay, the blurb says this. A man and his teenage daughter realize they're at the center of a dark and sinister event while watching a concert. That's the entire blurb.
That sounds right.
The dark and sinister event is, by the way, we're going to be talking about spoilers from here on out. So if you haven't seen Trap and you don't want to be spoiled, turn off the pod. But the sinister event at the center of it is Dad is also a serial killer. And the concert is a setup to capture the serial killer. That's it. That's the plot. It's thin. You think that's really thin, but M. Night is M. Night, and he just has a way of ratcheting up the suspense and the dread and all that, and it's great. So I'll let you go first. What did you like about this movie?
Honestly, Josh Hartnett's acting.
Oh, superb.
He was back.
Oh my goodness. He's totally back. If you didn't realize it from Oppenheimer, he is back. Where did Josh Hartnett go? Dudes who can act like this should have never left. It's not a stretch to say that he carries this movie. M. Night really builds this movie around him. So something else I didn't realize about M. Night movies until this movie, and I thought, oh, he does this a lot. He has his actors talk directly to the camera. Even when they're engaged in a conversation with another character, he's filming it where it's like he's having the dialogue with you, the movie watcher. And that does such a great job of highlighting the good actors. So I remembered him doing that with Mel Gibson in Signs, but I didn't remember it until I watched this movie. And this movie, when he has Josh Hartnett doing that, looking into the camera, there's a subtlety in Josh's acting. It's just fantastic. It's just amazing. And I think M. Night needs to be applauded for the vehicle he gives actors. Sometimes he gives them a poop box. Like, he didn't do Marky Mark any favors with The Happening, right?
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes what he does for his actors is just phenomenal. And this is one of them. I thought Josh Hartnett was amazing.
Would The Happening have been better with Joaquin Phoenix?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we're being honest, can we say that Mark Wahlberg was miscast?
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Like, you're not playing to Wahlberg's strengths.
No.
He's very charming, and this is not a charming world.
Not a charming world, and he's in a weird conflict with Zooey Deschanel,
who's also really weird in that movie, but it works for her.
She's really weird.
She's funky. She's offbeat. Yeah.
So another thing that worked in Trap, and I've seen people complain about this, and I'm like, you all must not watch the Eras tour, the concert setup of Lady Raven. So, like, her stage, her persona, her dancers, it all reminded me of Taylor Swift's The Eras tour.
Right.
And people were like, They wouldn't have these long breaks in between stuff. They would if there's wardrobe changes, which Taylor Swift had those same breaks as well. So y'all need to watch the Eras Tour. I thought that the set and the imagery of the concert actually worked well.
Yeah, in Seattle, I obviously didn't watch the Eras Tour.
I have had to watch it twice. So I've watched it enough for both of us.
But for me, I didn't see anything that took me out of the movie. Like, I didn't see anything about the concert itself where I was like, oh, that seems unbelievable, or that doesn't seem accurate. Nothing took me out of it. So I thought that was great. Josh Hartnett was great. I thought, the directing, the tension, the dread of all that. He does something very clever in this movie. He plays around with his formula. Where, so I said calling his endings twists, calling that particular point of his movies a twist is actually not entirely accurate. It's more like the last puzzle piece that has a very important piece of information on it that helps you put together the entire picture. It actually happens early in the film. From the moment the dad looks at his phone and you see that he has a captive, and you know that he's the serial killer. That's actually the twist ending, except it happens earlier in the movie. So the viewer is invited in earlier than you're usually invited in an M. Night movie. But for me, it doesn't mess with the dread at all. It still is like, okay, no, this is important because we actually get to be in on the story now from near the beginning.
So some people say that's the twist. Others say it happens much later.
There is a miniature, twist at the end, but it really is more of a twist.
Yes.
It's more by definition a twist because you realize someone was working against him that you didn't know and wouldn't have expected. And so,
darn you, Allison Pill.
And so I think that was all very good. What about the movie? Did you have anything else good to say?
So the guy that works at the t-shirt stand, very captivating. Like,
right? He gets his own little mid-credit scene.
Yes. I'm like, I want to be friends with this guy.
Is he a comedian? I don't know anything about this guy, but he seemed like he was very funny, very engaging.
Jonathan Langdon.
Who are you, Jonathan Langdon? Born December 17th, 1987 in Ontario, Canada, actor, producer. Okay.
Although I have not seen anything else with him.
Best known for his supporting role as Hudson in the television series Run the Burbs. Yeah, never heard of it.
Yeah.
He's great. He was hilarious in that mid-credit scene. I was not expecting that.
I was so excited that we got it. I know people are like, no one would act like that. There are definitely people that are like that. I know people
Yes.
like that.
Yes, there's the cat that ate the canary, right?
Yes.
There's people who have a secret and they just can't wait to tell you about it. Somehow, some way, they've been invited in and they just got to share that information. There was another good part of this movie, and I don't want to skate past it. Miss Bliss is in this movie from Saved by the Bell.
Oh, hey!
You may also remember her as the original girl from The Parent Trap. Haley Mills plays the profiler in this. And it took me half the movie to figure out. I'm like, who is she?
Okay,
I know
so
her.
the whole time I'm like, she looks familiar. And now that you say it's Miss Bliss, it connects.
And then when I figured out who it was, I was like, hey, it's Haley Mills. She's alive. I had no idea. I was sure she was dead.
So I will say M. Night does a perfect job of capturing what I think an FBI profiler would act like. Now, I don't think that some of the choices that are made with them necessarily works, but the quirkiness of it.
Yeah.
And her breaking down the profile of Josh Hartnett, because I'm not going to say there's a lot. There might be like 5 people in the United States, but there are people that are like this, that are particularly organized, and they almost go reverse fight or flight in those intense situations where they stay calm. They're trying to figure out their way around it. they're actually very logical and methodical of what they're doing. They're cerebral. So again, M. Night capturing the most obscure personality type.
Yeah.
He does it well.
Yeah, it's weird because M. Night, when he's at his best, does that. He's this obscure personality type, and it's genius. Like, the way he captures Josh Hartnett's serial killer in this movie, there's just genius and brilliance all around this. There are times in the movie where you want to feel for him.
Oh, I was rooting for him.
Even though you know that he's past the point of feelings.
Yep.
Right? So Cooper's very damaged. We know that. We know he's damaged. We know he's done terrible things. But we understand the way M. Night presents characters like this is he makes you understand that there's something behind the damage. There's always something. Even though it's not explicitly stated,
yep,
you know somebody broke him. What does that mean? It's not his fault entirely. Yep. He makes you feel by digging deep into like these kind of identities and personas. So I thought that was brilliant in the movie. And yes, of course, Haley Mills. Now I'm going to get to the what's bad.
Sweet.
And here's where M. Night tends to go off the rails. And I've already kind of hinted on this. The bigger the setting, because he writes people as odd and almost alternate reality versions of people, they don't always act the way they would act in the normal world. And it works on an intimate setting because if it's one family out in the country in Pennsylvania during an alien invasion, you're like, yeah, they're weird because some people are weird. The problem is when you're in a stadium with almost 30,000 people at a concert, when everybody's weird and not making decisions the way normal humans would make them, it stretches my ability to go on the ride. And this movie, the police in general, the law enforcement in general of this movie, none of them are making decisions that I feel like they would have made in a real life setting, because there's so much stretching of the imagination here. Like, for instance, the whole idea of the movie is based on this giant sting. They're using a Taylor Swift level concert with 30,000 people, and they've got the entire police force, the FBI, and all these people there to try and catch this serial killer because they've arrived at some information that he's going to be there. So they've got all these people there. And then later on in the movie, when it escapes from that environment and everyone knows he's the serial killer and the family has just found out, the wife stays home alone with two cops out front. Say what now? Nobody would do that. Another example, there's a scene, a really cool scene, by the way, because I don't want you to feel like I'm complaining, but there's a scene where Josh Hartnett puts on an apron to pose as someone working in concessions to kind of infiltrate the cop headquarters inside the stadium. And he walks in there, and of course he's amazing. The acting's incredible, but he's wearing like this Cosby sweater. And he's a middle-aged man, and he's clean cut. He looks nice, and he's just put on an apron. And it's almost like the Clark Kent situation. Oh, we can't tell it's Superman because Clark Kent's wearing glasses. In this instance, he's put on an apron, and everyone's like, oh yeah, this dude obviously works for concessions at a stadium. You ever been to a stadium?
I have.
You ever seen the people that work in concessions? No offense, but they don't look like that dude. Nobody had none of these cops who do law enforcement investigations for a living. None of them, no red flags there. There's another scene where he has coerced the pop star to get them out of the building. And she walks out alone with the killer and his daughter. When have you ever seen a pop star at the level that she's presented without an entourage? Nobody thought it was weird. They walk by a group of police, and they forsake, because she's with them, they forsake the inspection that's supposed to happen. That's what I'm talking about, is there's this stretching of reality that he can't help because he writes characters so odd that if the setting's big enough, if there's enough people in the lens of the camera, it becomes less and less engaging.
So I could suspend my disbelief with leaving with the pop star just because What everyone else has been told by this point is this is basically a Make-A-Wish kid.
Yep, that's fair.
And take a joyride in the limousine with the pop star. This will make her whole life.
Yeah, but no manager, no handler, nothing.
John Cena would do it. I don't know, like...
Not Salika Shyamalan, who looks like she's about 4'10", 85 pounds, soaking wet.
Yeah. So I don't know if other big names would do it that way. John Cena, yes, I would believe John Cena would do that. There are some moments that you do kind of have to question, just like you said, when he goes back to where the cops are and he has the apron on. With them supposed to be on watch and noticing for things, everyone else that works for the stadium or the arena has a purple polo. Where's your polo, bruh?
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's so small. It's a nitpick, but I think those are the things that will... I think M. Night, what he needs to realize is those are the things that'll take people out of his world. And that's not what he wants to do. He wants to draw people in, which he does so expertly with movies like The Village and Signs.
So on this one, knowing early on that he's the serial killer, I'm like, I don't know if there's going to be a twist. So, like, I'm actually able to sit back and just enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate that.
Yep. I didn't mind with him playing around with his formula at all. I was very engaged.
I'm like, this is super helpful. I'm not trying to diagnose what's going to happen and what to be on the lookout for. I'm just going to enjoy this movie. And then Allison Pill. She broke my heart.
You really like Allison Pill. Pill, sorry.
Oh, so she was in Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah, she's been in. I recognized her. I didn't recognize her greatly, but I did recognize that she's an actress I've seen before.
So her being the wife, I'm like, oh, they're a loving family. But her being behind the twist, I'm like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Josh Hartnett was very endearing at times in this movie.
Yeah, spoiler, you think at first she's like, what's the syndrome where they seem captive but they've fallen for you fall for the captive. What's that called? There's a name for that.
Yeah. It's not Stockholm syndrome.
That's it. Yeah. Stockholm syndrome. They seem like when it moves back to his home, the story moves back to his home, you think, oh, they're so over the top friendly that they must have she must have Stockholm syndrome, specifically the wife. But no, then you're like, oh, she has no idea. And then you think, oh, she gets slammed with the truth. And then it becomes this shocking thing, only to have the twist come where, no, she found out and she's been working against them the whole time.
How dare you?
Because that was a hole in the plot. For a little bit, you're like, okay, if this dude is so rational and logical, which you pointed out is the difference between serial killers and most humanity, is they don't go into fight or flight. They go into this weird cerebral place where all of a sudden they're crossing every T and dotting every I. And you're led to believe that he's made just a very bad error to be found out. And you find out, spoiler, that it's actually the wife has been working against him. And then you're like, because he's just as mystified. He's like, how could I have made this mistake?
That was something that was puzzling me until we find out the wife knew.
Yeah. But do you have a deeper theme for this movie? As we kind of go quickly through the rest of this little mini review.
So, like, oddly, he really is a good family man, like, especially towards his daughter. Like, he sticks up, he's virtuous, he wants her to have a good time. Like, he knows she's had a rough go of things. He just is very loving.
In a backwards sort of way, this movie is a proponent of what human connection does for us. Mm-hmm. Because here's a human being who's absolutely and utterly broken to the point where he does terrible, terrible things. And yet there's these little bits of dialogue where he's talking about, and the truth is coming out, where you get the feeling that he tried to stop himself because of them.
Yes.
He tried to not do these terrible things. And so you see, whereas if he doesn't have them, he never would have. So there is an effect of human connection. It's in a backwards sort of way. M. Night is giving you a story that says human connection is very good.
And also don't judge a book by its cover, because our friend at the concession stand is like, this guy looks nice. He seems reasonable and logical, and like, oh yeah, I'll just be buddies with him. And then you get the mid-credit scene.
Oh, if you didn't stay for the mid-credit scene, you probably should go look that up on YouTube. It's hilarious, but it's also like, oh yeah, not everyone is as they appear.
And it's crazy because this guy was literally all about this serial killer, the butcher.
He was a fan.
Yeah.
Not a fan, but you know how people listen to the podcast these days, and they're just into that true crime stuff. He's that kind of fan.
Yes. He knows all the information about this killer, and yet literally didn't know it when it was right in front of him.
There's probably another discussion and pod episode there of the difference between the pop culture versions of true crime and the real version, and in the human mind especially, because of course he's not going to recognize him. He knew all the information about the serial killer, but he didn't recognize him when he's right in front of him, because of course he wouldn't, because you got the pop culture version.
And I guess like the only thing they did know for sure was that he was a man.
Yes.
Because he could have been one of these three guys that were on camera, and if he was the white guy, he had a weird tattoo. And like, I wanted to know the meaning behind the tattoo.
By the way, everyone on Twitter would have known who it was with that information, because they'd have been like, of course it's the white guy.
Yes. Look at that tattoo.
Oh man. Okay, so who's the winner of this movie in your opinion?
It is Josh Hartnett.
Agreed. There's
the Hartnett
no question.
Sans is on.
There's just no question that Josh Hartnett is the winner of this movie. Who's the loser of the movie?
So I looked at the box office numbers, and it hasn't made back its money yet, but it's close. But it was opening weekend last weekend. So I am not going to say M. Night yet.
But it's a worry. It's a concern.
It's a concern.
There's a very obvious way to go here that I'm not going to go, and that involves nepotism. And I'm not going to do that because I feel like that's low-hanging fruit.
It is.
She does fine in the movie. She's not great. She's not a great actress, but it's okay. She's fine in the movie. It doesn't take me out.
She might be a good singer.
Apparently, yeah. Yeah, I'm concerned now because we've just talked the last hour about kind of how much we really like M. Night Shyamalan. And I feel like Hollywood can't quite figure him out. So this one's critically about 50%. It's not going to do gangbusters as far as a gross. Mm-hmm. And I'm concerned because actually at the end of the day, while I recognize that this isn't a perfect M. Night Shyamalan movie, I enjoyed the ride.
Oh, yeah.
I love sitting in his world for a couple of hours, and I'm concerned that he's going to go into this other place where he gets shunned again because he's not a box office success. But I don't think that's his fault. I think he just does what he does, and I'm here for what he does.
Little known fact about M. Night, he wrote the screenplay or co-wrote the screenplay for Stuart Little.
Yeah, he points that out a lot.
Yeah, like, if you want to know his range, look at all his movies and then look at Stuart Little.
Yeah, he actually did an interview for this movie, for Trap, where he said he figured out at some point that humor is good. If your thing is suspense, to break up the suspense, like you need to break up the suspense and the dread every once in a while with humor, because it's just this natural flow that helps audiences get back in. They're like, oh, we're back in the dread. You can't just do dread for 2 hours straight.
Concession stand guy.
Yeah. So
humor.
Jonathan Langdon as the concession stand guy, as we talked about, but also Marnie McPhail, who plays Jody's mom.
Yes.
The whole ongoing bit with Jody's mom is hilarious. And so he is developing M. Night as a filmmaker, because it's what made Signs so endearing too, is there were genuine moments of laughter in the little quirks of the characters.
Looking at you kids.
Yeah. And so it's evident in this movie too, how many walkie-talkies out of 10, because a walkie-talkie is a big plot point in this movie. How many walkie-talkies out of 10 are you giving Trap?
I'll go 7.
Yeah. I'm 6.5, 7. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's not unlike Deadpool and Wolverine for me.
So I have it above Deadpool and Wolverine, but it also is more my type of movie.
Yeah. And it's very similar. And I know you're going to be like, how can this movie be similar to Deadpool and Wolverine? The people making the movie are just doing what they do. Mm-hmm. And you're either in on that or you're not.
Yes.
And the thing I respect about it is that's not necessarily caring about public consumption. Even Deadpool Wolverine, which is going to make all the monies, they clearly care about public consumption. The people at the heart of the creativeness of the movie, they're just doing what they do. They don't really care. Although there is some fan service to be talked about with that movie rather than this movie, where it's just literally M. Night doing what he does.
Yes.
So I liked it. It was fun. It stretches you at times because I think the setting gets a bit too big for M. Night's type of stories. But once it refocuses down, once they leave the concert, it gets better for me. Have you seen Trap? What did you think? Let us know in the comments below the social media post for this. Also, are you a fan of M. Night Shyamalan? What are your favorite M. Night Shyamalan movies? What are your favorite twists, as it were? What are your least favorite Shyamalan movies? Looking at you, lady in the water.
I don't know if that's my least favorite.
Yeah, there's several to choose from, but let us know. As always, subscribe, review us, share the pod. That always helps us, and we will see you next time.
Pop Culture Pastor.